Hi, everyone. We'll just give one more minute and then we'll get started. Bonjour tout le monde. On attendra juste une autre minute pour que les gens se connectent et on débutera par la suite. Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for this funding workshop. We're glad to have you here, and we'll be showcasing some FCM funding, and we'll have a presentation from EOS EcoEnergy, as well as having some breakout rooms for some more provincial discussions. Bonjour tout le monde, merci de vous être joints à notre atelier sur les demandes de financement. On va pouvoir présenter quelques informations sur du financement de la FCM, une présentation de EOS Éco-Énergie et aussi avoir des discussions sur des opportunités provinciales. Oops. So if you need interpretation, please click on the little globe icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll be fielding questions in English and in French. So if you require interpretation in either language, please do that. Donc, si vous avez besoin d'interprétation, s'il vous plaît, veuillez cliquer sur le globe en bas de votre écran. On va pouvoir prendre des questions en anglais et en français. Donc, s'il vous plaît, n'hésitez pas d'utiliser l'interprétation. So Climate Atlantic operates in Atlantic Canada, which is on the unceded and unsurrendered homelands of multiple Indigenous people, including Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki, all members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as Beothuk, Innu, and Inuit. I'll just go through the agenda quickly. We're starting out with introductions and welcome. And we'll be continuing with, so you're getting the background right now, and further background in just a moment. Then we'll be going on to the FCM funding opportunities. So this is going to be a brief summary of some of those opportunities. This is the first of a series of webinars. And so you'll be able to learn more details at the subsequent events. We'll then follow up with a presentation from EOS on collaboration between communities and NGOs. And at 11:10, we'll have some provincial related breakout rooms where there'll be discussions on funding as well as different supports that you can access within your province. And finally, we'll end with a general Q&A, and we can end the meeting by noon. So I'll hand it over to my colleague, Trevor.
Hi, good morning. So I'm the Municipal Climate Resilience Coordinator here with Climate Atlantic. The funding for today's workshop is provided through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation. There are 13 funded projects across Atlantic Canada, and we are one of the 6 partner projects that are able to bring sessions like this to you. So Climate Atlantic is able to provide a number of services, not only for municipalities and communities, but to all Atlantic Canadians. And the program today, even though it's tailored for municipalities and communities for funding opportunities, we make this information available to everybody free of charge and as low barrier as possible so that climate adaptation becomes as accessible as possible. Climate Atlantic provides a number of services. This could be through simple service requests to programs that we offer that are for either training or helping direct to funding opportunities, like we're doing today, um, as well as the subsequent learning engagements that are going to happen after this session today, and just ongoing communication engagement to all of our partners and collaborators, as well as um, everyone that is seeking information on adaptation. These funding discussions today, oh, not sure what's going on. Can we go back to the original slide, Mintaka? Um, so the session today is for providing information on accessible, reliable, dedicated, and long-term funding for adaptation, both federally and provincially. And the session will provide support for identifying and navigating third-party funding and provide examples of how to leverage partners and services to submit your application when the time comes. So you will get a rundown of provincial and federal funding that's out there currently, um, and even have engagement with those that are administering the funding. We're going to be providing an example of collaboration. We have Cal with the EOS Eco Energy with us today. That's going to provide an example of a collaboration with the municipality through NGO. And also, we're going to have information on strategies for accessing funding. So using tools and resources like funding navigators or booking a session with FCM when the time comes and you're interested in funding, as well as some tips. So for example, keeping track of when funding opens and closes, and maybe even some advice on what constitutes a good funding application. So I'll introduce our first speaker, Charlene with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and she's going to present on good information about the Green Municipal Fund and adaptation funding that's available.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor, for the introduction. And thank you so much for Climate Atlantic for having us today in order to talk about our different funding opportunities in terms of climate adaptation. So as Trevor said, my name is Charlene. I work for the Green Municipal Fund as an outreach officer, specifically for the program Local Leadership in Climate Adaptation, which we're going to be talking about today. And I'm also briefly going to be discussing our GCCC program, Growing Canada's Community Canopies, so another adaptation program that we have at GMF. So if ever you have any questions after, we're going to have a little period of questions. And also I will include my contact information. So feel free to book a meeting, send me an email. My job is really to accompany you through the process of applying. So any question is, no question is too small. So really keep that in mind. Awesome. So for those that do not know the Green Municipal Fund, it's a part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It's a branch that was created in the early 2000s, and it's a program of $2.4 billion. And what's really interesting about the Green Municipal Fund is that we offer a blended mix of grants and loans, but there's also capacity development. So for us, it's not enough to fund projects, but we also want to accompany municipalities to make sure that they're able to get their projects off the ground. So if you're interested in these kinds of capacity development options, we have a bunch of different offers for you, communities of practice, various workshops. So that's something that that is available and that we offer. So as I was saying, the Green Municipal Fund, this branch of the FCM, it's existed since the year 2000. And in that time, we have diminished 2.9 million tons of greenhouse gases. There have been more than 2,000 projects approved and 1.6 billion of projects approved. So as I was saying, at GMF, we have adaptation programs like we are discussing today, but there are also many other initiatives. So if any of these initiatives are interesting to you, feel free to send me a message and I can hook you up with the right person to discuss some of these projects. So I'll just give a brief overview so you can keep these on your radar in case this is of interest to you. But we have programs for sustainable municipal buildings, for community energy systems, transferring organic waste to energy, the electrification of municipal fleets, projects that have a net zero transformation. So a bottom line of no emissions, so taking waste energy and converting that to a source that is useful to heat your buildings, for example. We also have a whole section that is energy efficient initiatives. So we have the community energy efficient financing, buildings retrofit, sustainable housing. So these are all various programs that are on the mitigation side of climate change. So reducing our footprint. Whereas today I'm going to be talking about the two programs down here, which are for climate adaptation. So knowing that climate change is happening and adapting to it. So as I was saying, these two different programs that we're going to be talking about today, one, the Growing Canada's Community Canopies, is all about tree planting. I'll delve into it more, but we finance 50% of the tree planting costs. And then on the other side, we have the Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation, which is the program that we'll be primarily focusing on today. So now doing a deep dive into the LLCA program, the Local Leadership on Climate Adaptation. We have two different programs. We have the Climate Ready Plans and Processes, and then also Adaptation and Action. So the Climate Ready Plans and Processes is preparing you to be able to do a capital project. And the Adaptation and Action, as the title suggests, it's really taking action on the ground, concrete steps. So Adaptation and Action is currently open, and will be open until there's two different intakes, but basically until October. The Climate Ready Plans and Processes will be opening later this summer. The dates have not yet been disclosed. Oh, I'm not sure, but if we could go back into viewing mode for the PowerPoint. Perfect. Back on track. Awesome. So the big question that we always ask is, have you been recently affected by the impacts of climate change? So I'm curious if people want to write in the chat what they have been experiencing in terms of climate change in their municipalities. I'll give you a minute just to write in the chat what you've been experiencing. What I'm assuming in at the Atlantic provinces is a lot of coastal erosion, stormwater surges, but I'm curious to see what you've been experiencing on the ground. Lots of heat warnings. I agree. I am in Montreal and it is very hot today. Christina says flooding and slope movement. Absolutely. We have coastal erosion by Gabby here, longer and more intense heat waves, storm surges that cause flooding. Mizelle says seasonal changes, wildfires, shoreline erosion. Absolutely. So you're experiencing, oh, Adrian here has written inland flooding is a big issue. Fluvial and rain, ice and snow, flash floods. Okay, so you're experiencing many different vestiges of climate change. And so the reason that this fund exists is really so that we can take proactive measures on the ground. A statistic that is often mentioned is that $1 invested today will save you $13 to $15 down the line in terms of climate adaptation. So it's really for us, it's really important to accompany municipalities so that you feel the strain lesser down the line. Perfect. So, one thing to mention about adaptation in action. Here, we're going to go back. For adaptation in action is that we have two different streams. You can see her at the bottom of the slide. We have both a feasibility study and then an implementation project, and various amounts attributed to both. So really, we have these the planning and then the action, and within the action, we have the planning of the action and then the action itself. So here's just a little diagram showing the various programs and how you can see them on the ground. So as you can see, the climate ready plans and processes, this is planning for the adaptation. It's climate risk assessments, it's adaptation plans. As you can see, this is something that is an overall umbrella. And then adaptation action is those concrete on the ground actions to be taken. We also have another program which will be released later this year or early the following year called Financing Adaptation, which is a blended offer of capital financing as well as private and public financing. And then, as I will be talking about later, we have Growing Canada's Community Canopies, which is greening all the spaces in between. So climate ready plans and processes. So what we have here is an offer that will enable Canadian local communities to adopt a large scale climate focused asset management plan, risk and vulnerability assessments, and capacity building support. As I was saying, it's the planning behind the action. So the kinds of projects that we accept are risk assessments, we have adaptation planning, vulnerability assessments. So really just doing a high level overview of all those issues you were mentioning, the coastal erosion, the fire, flash flooding, etc. Eligible costs, we have staff time, we have technical services, we have trainings. So in a nutshell, that's the program that will be released later this summer, dates to be determined. And then our program Adaptation Action, as I was saying, it is already open and there are two components. So this is the moment that we're on the ground, we're doing concrete projects. The first part of it is the feasibility study, as I was mentioning. So this is really, I like to call it the recipe of rolling out your adaptation project. So we want to know what is the budget, what is the why, the how, and then the implementation projects is really rolling out that project. So we have for the feasibility studies, we have up to 80% of eligible costs are covered. As I was saying, this is the recipe to roll out your capital project. The maximum amount you could receive is $70,000. For the implementation project, the baseline that you could receive is 60% of eligible costs. And what's really important here is that the eligible costs can be no more than $1 million for the implementation projects. More than that, there's a federal program called CMAF that you can access. So, and the project needs to be a complete project. So, for example, if you're doing wetland restoration, need to make sure that the project is a standalone project. And for us, we want to know that a community is creating more resilience from beginning to end. So really a project in and of itself and not part of a bigger project. So I gave a little example here of an adaptation in action project that was funded. So in the Annapolis Royale, we have the restoring a shoreline due to coastal storm surge. So just to give you an example of what kind of projects are eligible from your region. And then also over here, we have the implementing of automatic backup power to critical sewage lift stations in Stratford, PEI. And these are the amounts that were approved. Just to give you an idea of what kinds of projects that you could put forth. One thing that I forgot to mention for the LLC offer is that it's an offer that is open for the following 8 years, so until 2033. And so each different municipality can access, it's depending on the size of the municipality. For populations under 50,000, you are able to access one implementation project and one feasibility study during that time. So for the duration of that time, for populations above 50,000, you can access two, from 50,000 to 500,000, and then populations above 500,000, you can access three. So that's for the duration of the program until 2033. So that was a brief overview of LLCA, and now I'll do a high-level overview of Growing Canada's community canopies. So as I was saying, this is tree planting. This is a fund that is $291 million. There's funding for over 500 initiatives. This one is until 2031, and we're hoping for about 1.2 million trees. So this program is a combined tree planting. We offer funds for tree planting, but also for strategic funding. So this is plans, studies, staff, etc. And as with LLCA, we offer capacity development. This is specifically offered by Tree Canada. So if you don't have greening specialists within your community, or even if you do, Tree Canada, they're specialists both in urban forestry, but also on our program. So you can run your ideas by them and they will accompany you in order to submit a project. So we have, as I was saying, two different programs. We have the tree planting funding. So basically, this program is now open, so you could submit an application as of now. The funding closes, I believe it's September 18th. So you still have time to submit if this is of interest to you. Kinds of projects that are eligible. We have street tree planting, urban plantings, park tree plantings, riparian plantings, forest restoration. So all of this is within a municipal context. That's really important. And also another element that's important is that if you had already planned on planting, I don't know, 200 trees, for us, it's not to offer a rebate. We offer funding that will turning the money that you set aside for those 200 trees into 400 trees. So it's incremental projects that will stretch your dollar further. So as I was saying, planting costs are up to 50% for this program. Each municipality can access up to $10 million. There can be funding stacking. So for example, if you access funding from another organization, you can combine these in order to cover more than 50% of the cost. But it's just really important that it cannot be stacked with funding from 2 billion trees. That is a federal program, because our funding comes from 2 billion trees. So that's just one aspect to keep in mind. You can also have up to a maximum of $1 million per municipality for infrastructure costs. So if you need to rip out a sidewalk or you want to put silva cells, etc. And also shrubs are up to 15% covered. There is also a strategic planning funding that says here spring 2025, but actually it should be in the fall 2025. So this is more high level planning in terms of your planting plans. As I was saying, capacity development is really at the heart of what GMF offers. So you're able to access coaching from Tree Canada. And as I was saying, they are both urban forestry experts, but also experts on our program. So they can really accompany you in making sure that your plan is a solid one. We also offer fact sheets in order to help you with the capacity development. So you can scan this QR code here in order to access our resource library. I don't know if I mentioned it for LLCA, but we also have a resource library of various cheat sheets, various information sheets to help you in your projects. So how do you apply? So the first step is to do a readiness check online. So you can just see if you have all the requirements in order to apply. For example, in order to apply for adaptation and action, you need a climate adaptation plan. In order to submit a capital project, you need a feasibility study. So this readiness check will just make sure that you have everything that it takes to apply. After that, you will contact a GMF representative, which is me. So you can get my information at the end of this webinar, and you can book a meeting with me. And they're a half-hour slot, and we can just troubleshoot your project and see what would be eligible. After that, there's a pre-application, and then after that, a full application. So after that, you can expect an answer after about 6 months. So if you would like to book a meeting with us, you can just scan this code. My name is Charlene. You can book a meeting with me or any of my colleagues. Really, as I was saying, this is our job, is to accompany you. So we're really happy to do so and available for that. Well, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I'll be here for a few minutes in order to answer any of your questions. And in the chat, I will put my email so that you can contact me if you have any questions or if you'd like to book a meeting. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can unmic yourself and just ask them directly. Oh, I actually see one here from Pam Goodfellow, City of Fredericton. I still do not have the email to get access to the portal. Once I've received this, how long from when we do the pre-application submission until we get access to the full application? I understand that we only have until August 18th for the first intake. Was wondering if this would be extended. Thank you so much for your question, Pam. So yes, the portal should be live. We are doing a transition internally of our portal. And so it should be live either this week or next week. You should be receiving an email in the following, either as I was saying this week or next week, in order to access your new portal. And after doing so, you should be able to get in pretty fast. Once you've submitted the pre-app, you'll get we ask for about 5 days to review the pre-app. And then after that, you can access the full application. So yes, as you said, the deadline is August 18th, but right after is another intake. So there's 2 intakes, the one that finishes on August 18th, and then I believe it's August 20th until October. So 2 intakes back to back. So if the timing is a little too tight for the August 18th, you can just submit for the following one.
Thanks so much, Charlene. If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand. You can also pop them in the chat and we'll be happy to address them. Okay, it's not looking like there. Oh, there's another question in the chat. That's great. What is one of the most common mistakes or gaps that you have seen in applications for FCM funding?
It's a very good question, Madison. Um, I guess I think the most important aspect is scoping the project out from the get-go, and that's what our role is in outreach, to meet with you and making sure that the eligibility is on point. So sometimes, there's projects, sometimes people want to submit projects that are more in line with mitigation. So as I was saying, mitigation is reducing your footprint, whereas this program is all about adaptation. So that's one aspect that I have sometimes seen. But common mistakes or gaps, such a good question. I guess, yeah, just scoping out the project at the get-go and making sure that it fits within the requirements. But that's why we're here, and that's one of the aspects that we can help applicants with.
There's another
So-
question in the chat as well. Charlene, you can just go ahead if you wanna read it and answer it.
Awesome. So from Rebecca, we have, will the funding only be applicable for land-based projects, or is there space to develop projects in the coastal marine habitats that are adjacent to the municipalities? I'm curious, Rebecca, if you have an example of such a a coastal project. Do you want to unmic yourself? And eelgrass beds. Okay. You would have to essentially you have to make a very compelling argument from so as I was saying, in order to apply for adaptation in action, you have to first have done either a risk assessment or an adaptation plan. So within that adaptation plan, you need to draw a line between the risks identified in the adaptation plan to then do your capital project. So if, for example, you have identified in your adaptation plan that a risk has something to do with the eelgrass beds, and that in rehabilitating the eelgrass beds, you are able to create more resiliency within the community, then you can create that argument. But this is basically, we really need to shift the needle to more resiliency within the community, and it has to be an issue that undermines adaptation resilience. So essentially, if you can find that, our fil conducteur, if you can find that linkage, then that's something that we could talk about. But very much when you're thinking about your adaptation projects, really think about what are your vulnerabilities, and then how can you shift towards more resiliency within your community. I see Pam Goodfellow has written here, can a project be estimated over, I think that's $1 million. Yeah, $1 million, but understanding that we can only receive 600,000 from FCM, and the city or other partners will fund the remaining of the project. So the project cannot be over $1 million, then it would fall into the category of DMAF. But you can stack funding. So if your project is $950,000, and so I was saying that the baseline that you can receive is 60%, but you get 10 additional percent for being a community under 10,000, and you get a 10 additional percent if you are using nature-based solutions, and a 10 additional percent if you integrate AREI, so reconciliation and anti-racism, equity, and inclusion. So all that, the reason I'm saying that is because most often than not, you can be funded all the way up to 100%. The minimum you could get is 60%. So all that to say is you can stack funding. But as I was saying, the project cannot be over $1 million, must be under $1 million, and must be a standalone project, as I was mentioning. We have another message from Samira here saying that for those Indigenous bands that are community-based, no ISC status, and are not and are not connected to a municipality, are they still eligible for the adaptation fund? So that's a really great question, Samira. So first of all, for Indigenous bands that are not a municipality, so if they're not on the CRA, then we have to see if there's a service agreement. So I'm not sure if the community in question would have, let's say, a waste pickup service agreement or fire service agreement, any kind of service agreement. They can then apply through that other municipality. So that is one way to go about that. For other examples, you can send me an email and we can look more into it. But that's the first approach that we use for that. Okay, Adrian wrote a note here for those that are unfamiliar with eelgrass beds and adaptation. Eelgrass is a natural, nature-based approach to attenuating wave action in some context situation. Thank you very much, Adrian. I was not familiar with this. So exactly, if you can draw a link between the project that you are doing on the ground and adaptation, that's really what we're looking for. So that, and as I was saying, you get a 10% extra if you have a nature-based solution. This is a nature-based solution, so that's something to keep in mind as well. So Pam Goodfellow here has written, but we can stack with DMAF, which would be 100% funded. DMAF does not fund under $1 million, and we do not fund over $1 million. So those would be incompatible. But if you have another funding source, you could stack funding. But as I was saying, if your community is under 10,000, if you do AREI, if you have nature-based solutions, you can access up to 100% funding. So that's also what I would suggest is that you book a meeting with me. We look at your particular case because it could be that you will only need to pay 10% of the project, in which case stacking, if you find it, it's great, but there's less of a risk at that point. So Tara Ryan here has written, I'm curious about how the tree planting consultations would work. Would FCM folks or specialists from other groups travel to do the consultation? No, so it would all be online. The consultation is with Tree Canada. So what would happen is if you're interested in the tree consultation, I would put you in dialogue with Tree Canada. And then you have, I believe it's something like 3 or 4 hours of consultation before application and then more hours post application. So all online. But it's really looking at the work you're doing and to see the nuances in there. So Alexandra Casey has said, our applications for DMAF open. Where can we get more information on the program? Thank you, Adrian. Adrian has put information on the program. I do believe that it's not currently open. And I do not have more information as to when it will. Oh, thank you, Trevor. Trevor has written currently closed, but when it is open, check back with us. So we have someone, Porto Port, which has written, if our municipal plan 2022 to 2032 has a section related to climate adaptation, would that suffice as having a plan in place already? So if your climate, it can be like a climate, a general climate plan that has both adaptation and mitigation. So if there's a section on adaptation that evaluates the risks, then that's what we're looking for. We're looking to basically, the adaptation plan will orient the future projects. So we want to basically know that you have looked into it, that you know what the risks are, and that the subsequent project, the capital project, is in line with what has been identified as a primary issue. So we have from Samira here, for those Indigenous bands that are community-based. Oh, and we already did that one. So from Gabby here, we have a canopy question. So we have a Tree Canada grant for riparian and, wow, sorry, it just moved. Oh, I just lost the comment. Found it again. Okay, so we have a riparian and coastal planting, and Trees Canada has forestry specialists that has helped with species, where to plant optimal spaces for planting based on species, soil, wetness. Perfect. Bruce has been a great resource. Awesome. Happy to hear that, Gabby, that Tree Canada has helped you out with your project and that has been a great resource. They have consultants from various areas around Canada. So you would be talking to a consultant that knows your reality in Atlantic Canada. So that is a big plus for sure. So Darcy has written that we have received funding to create a non-for-profit tree nursery with 2 billion trees, and we're wondering if we can apply for canopies to assist other organizations. We would ask for staffing and seed costs to help the organization get the trees. Interesting. So if I understand correctly, Darcy, you have received funding for creating the plant nursery, but you're looking for money to the staffing and seed costs specifically of the nursery. Is that correct? Okay. So we fund planting, like the physical planting of the trees, and unfortunately not of the creation of a plant nursery. But once you get that plant nursery up and running and you want to plant, fund the planting, that's something that can be funded.
Thanks so much, everyone, for your questions and Charlene for your answers. We will, just for the sake of time, have to move on to our next presentation. But if there are more questions for Charlene, we'll take note of them if they pop up in the chat, and we can send them to you after, or you can reach out to Charlene directly. She put her email in the chat for us. So thank you again so much, Charlene, for your presentation and all of your answers to the questions.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah. Awesome. So now I think we're going to go into our next presentation. So we have Cal from EOS Eco Energy to present for us.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for the introduction, and thank you, Trevor, also for inviting me to speak today. I'm happy to be here and see so many people attending today's workshop. This is great. So I am currently the acting executive director of EOS Eco Energy. I've been with EOS since 2022 and have been in this current role since October of last year. And we work very closely and have for a number of years with our local municipalities, which are on the smaller side, less than 10,000 population. So today I'll just be sharing some of our experiences and hopefully some helpful tips that can inspire future collaborations between NGOs and municipalities. So next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So this is just a little bit of background about us as an organization so that you can understand where we're coming from. We are a community-based environmental nonprofit. We were incorporated in 2004 and we achieved charitable status in 2021. So we serve mainly the municipalities of Tantramar, Strait Shores, and Memramcook. We have expanded some of our services to more broadly southeastern New Brunswick, but we tend to be more community-based in our projects. The projects in particular that we do are based around energy efficiency and renewables, community education, either youth or adults, on any of our climate and environmental topics. We do watershed monitoring and management of the watersheds in the Chignectar region. So that's Tantramar, Rockport, Dorchester, and Cape Tormentine. And additionally, we do a number of projects that involve climate change adaptation and mitigation. Some of that you will see after when I discuss some of our work with municipalities, but this is also including things like green spaces, workshops, and whatnot. So EOS, over its history, I will say not me, I haven't been here that long, but our previous executive director, our founders of our organization, their work over the years has really earned us a reputation as a trusted community partner and someone who can be trusted to help undertake environmental and climate related projects. So next slide, please. Great, so this is just a little bit of background on the municipalities that we mainly work in. So Tantramar, we are based in Sackville, New Brunswick. So that is in the recently, as of 2022, amalgamated municipality of Tantramar. So the population is 9,001 as of last time we checked. And it is composed of the previous towns of Sackville, Dorchester, and all the adjacent unincorporated areas. Straight Shores was formerly the village of Port Elgin, Bayfield, Cape Tormentine, and other parts of Botsford and Westmoreland local service districts. Their current population is sitting at, I think, around 1,000. So you can kind of envision just how small that population of Port Elgin was prior to amalgamation. So next slide, please. Okay, sorry, I don't know if it froze or anything or where we left off, but if we could go to the next slide, that would be great.
Sorry for the technical difficulties we're facing.
No worries. Okay, well, I can start talking in that case about the projects and partnerships that we have worked on over the past several years. So we have completed climate change adaptation plans for the former town of Sackville, the former village of Dorchester, former village of Port Elgin, as well as rural Tantramar. And one of our more notable projects has been a municipal climate change and sustainability coordinator for the town of Sackville and then later the municipality of Tantramar. We also do some environmental consulting for these municipalities. These are things like environmental monitoring. So the new stormwater retention ponds that we have in the area, for example, those are, oh, perfect, this slide back.
Sorry, is this the right slide, Cal?
It is, yes, it is. Yeah. So the environmental monitoring that we do, for example, for the recent stormwater retention ponds that were constructed in Tantramar, we've done monitoring of the water quality there and the culverts. We also do green space planting and maintenance. So we have a green roof on the town hall that we planted and maintain. And a number of other rain gardens and food forests around the community, and also just other green infrastructure projects. So we did help with consultation for the stormwater retention ponds, for example. And all of these projects were funded either through the New Brunswick Environmental Trust Fund, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the FCM, Green Municipal Fund. And I also wanted to highlight a lot of this work was done by funded by the Mount Allison Students Union Green Investment Fund. It's a smaller pot of funding, but it's been great for particularly the maintenance of our green spaces, where it's more difficult to find funds to maintain projects after they've been enacted. So that's a great source that we've utilized. Great, next slide, please. Perfect. So now I'll just talk a little bit about how the relationship works, and I will give a few more examples. I think actually before this, I had our current climate change projects manager, Janie Brooks. They were the last climate change and sustainability coordinator for the municipality. That position was active from 2021 to 2023. And during that time, some examples of other projects that were in coordinating the installation of solar park here, our climate change coordinator helped with that. We've helped partnering with a municipal engineer to coordinate the installation of EV chargers in downtown Sackville and Dorchester. We help develop and implement a climate lens that municipal staff can use to evaluate whether new projects are moving toward or away from climate change adaptation and mitigation. We have also helped develop a natural asset inventory that was for the previous town of Sackville. That was done with the Municipal Natural Assets Initiatives, I believe, and as well as the Climate Change Advisory Committee, which is a volunteer body that's part of Tantramar. We have helped draft a few bylaws that were never brought to council after amalgamation. So, but that work was done, and that is another example of help that can be done. For example, a draft of a climate-resistant tree planting bylaw, I think was one of them, and a no net runoff bylaw. And we've also had our climate change coordinator track the adaptation plan implementation. Later on, due to funding cuts, the position became a part-time position, so it was shared between EOS and the municipality, which was kind of a really neat setup because it allowed them to utilize the expertise of a climate change coordinator without having to pay a full-time salary. And during that time, there was, I think, more maintenance and follow-up on previous projects. So there was the monitoring of the productivity of our new solar panels and EV chargers, assistance and training for the climate lens, tracking the climate change adaptation plan implementation, and assisting staff with fleet purchases. So new electric fleets and municipal vehicles were purchased with our consultation. So now getting back to the current slide that we're at is how to really make a partnership like this work. And the number one, I mean, I'll read through these and add kind of my comments, but the number one I think is the most obvious, and that's just to foster relationships with people working at the municipality. It happens over time, attending events, asking to set up meetings, offering support if they have any questions, allowing them to reach out if needed is a great way to kind of maintain contact. Having a champion on the staff is really useful. So ours was previously I believe it was the director of corporate services in the town, ended up being the person who we dealt with most directly. But there could be someone else. So it could be useful to find a staff member who is really interested in these particular types of projects and has the capacity on their plate, because obviously you are here to provide additional capacity. So recognizing that, you know, municipal staff are very busy and there's a lot going on, it can definitely be useful to have one particular person that you correspond with. Learning how the municipality operates. This kind of goes hand in hand, I think, with the very last point here, which is to be prepared and plan ahead for some slower turnaround times than the NGO world. So if you work in a nonprofit or have before, you know how quickly things can move. As soon as you get your funding confirmation, you can begin on a project. That's not necessarily how it works for municipalities. There's a lot of checks in place for good reason. And just to have that expectation that, you know, things are going to progress at a slower rate. And that's okay. I think good advice too on a municipal side is to communicate about where you're at in a process. If you're working on confirming funding or the next steps of a project, because sometimes I think coming from outside of that municipal space, it's difficult to perceive where we're at in a project sometimes if you're just waiting for confirmation. Another step is just know what funding is available and how to apply. So for example, attending workshops like these and utilizing services like Climate Atlantic, which, you know, in their newsletter, they send out all the funding that is currently available. So funding, especially like FCM, the New Brunswick Environmental Trust Fund is another one. And there are other types of funding out there. So just kind of keeping aware of what's currently available. The next one is, I don't know if it's really the most relevant, but it's just good to know that the council is willing to vote in favor of a project before you're investing a lot of time. This is in particular for, I think, both staff and nonprofits. If you've written a funding application, you know how long that takes. You know that it's a lot of work, and at least how our municipalities operate. I can't speak for other ones, but council has to vote to apply for it and to accept the funding. So it can just be good to know that, you know, this is something that will be favored. And something that I think is often forgotten, but I can't stress how important it is to maintain that open communication between projects. If you're hoping to establish a long-term partnership and continue to work with someone in the future, it's great to just stay in touch while you're not actively working with them, just keeping up to date with what's going on, making sure if there's any staff changeover, you're aware of who's coming in and taking that person's place, and just making sure that your face is known, introducing yourself to the CAO and anyone else who you might be working with, and really just, you know, every few months reaching out and just getting updates on what's going on there and what's going on your end, I think is really valuable. And then next slide, please. I think, perfect, yes. So I think this is my last slide, and this is just talking about the benefits and things to consider. So the main goal of any sort of partnership, but this one in particular, is for the municipality to be able to reach its goals with climate adaptation without having to spend extra time and resources that it doesn't have at that moment. But I think it's really important to remember that the goal overall, depending on the project, is to build capacity. So some projects and partnerships, those are shorter term and they make sense depending on what the project is, what the scope is. But if you're looking at something like a long-term, you know, developing an adaptation plan, achieving net zero status, something like that, it's important to make sure that everyone is prepared to continue that work once the partnership ends, if it has to end, depending on funding, and just kind of, I think, developing a plan with sustainability in mind for how things will continue afterwards. And like I mentioned before, like having one champion on staff is great, but greater support, greater buy-in from everyone, and the responsibility for sustainability and long-term success is the best way to make sure that any of this work, you know, climate adaptation work, it is work to prepare for long-term events. So I think really stressing that it is something that needs to be worked on consistently is necessary for success. I think that's everything. Next slide. That might just be, yes. Okay, perfect. So you can contact me if you have any questions after this that like pop into your head. Maybe you didn't have time to ask them today, but my email's right there, the director at eosecoenergy.com. Janie Brooks, also, like I mentioned before, they are our current climate change projects manager, but they were also the previous climate change and sustainability coordinator for Tantramar. So they have more experience, I think, with this one-on-one work, that if you are interested at all, they are willing also to answer any questions. So their email is listed there, climatechange@eosecoenergy.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Cal. You know, often I go into a community and somebody comes up to me and they say, I volunteer for a nonprofit. I was looking at the Climate Atlantic newsletter. I saw this funding opportunity. How do I go to the municipality or the councillor and, you know, tell them about it? Am I being out of place by doing that? And totally not.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
perhaps a relationship like yourself, EOS has done, can be built over time with the municipality, adding that extra capacity. So, you know, you brought up a lot of great examples. We have a few minutes for some questions here before we go to breakout. And we'll also talk about some of the funding that you mentioned. We already talked about the FCM funding, but Environmental Trust Fund if you're in New Brunswick. And the breakouts will also address funding available to you by your province as well. So yeah, any questions in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand. Oh, we have a question from Age.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation, Cal. I guess could you let us know, and maybe this is before your time, but do you have a sense of how the relationship between EOS and the different municipalities started? In case there are any organizations here that would like to kind of do the same thing, or any municipalities that want to reach out to their to partner organizations or potential partner organizations within their communities.
Absolutely. So EOS was in a different position, I think, in the sense that our founders, our board was very active in the community already. So there was kind of that connection there to begin with. But just from my time, so I guess a little bit of information about, you know, how I came to this role and who I took over from. So Amanda Marlin, actually with Climate Atlantic now, was a long-term executive director of EOS. She worked for EOS for 10 years in the ED position. And just recently in 2023, yes, 2023, fall 2023, Brittany Cormier took over for her. And so we kind of went through that. And then later again, Brittany Cormier, she is still our executive director. I am just filling in for her for a year while she's on maternity leave. The process of transitioning over, I think is similar in how you would establish a connection. It is reaching out, making a point to make a meeting, to have a conversation, discuss. I think the important thing is to discuss how you can offer something for the municipality, support, framing it in a way that, you know, it's a way for you to achieve your goals, you know, look at what your community members are asking for you. We are a way that we can kind of bridge that gap and help you do it, because I understand that, you know, this isn't really everyone's expertise. This is the municipality all the time. So I think really just sometimes being a sticky wheel is a good thing. And also just, you know, offering a way to kind of fill in any gaps that they might be experiencing. And continuing with that. Don't just let it drop. Keep bugging them. Not all the time, but, you know, send up a follow-up email a couple months later. Yeah. I see another question in the chat. So, have you had to deal with a change in municipalities' council members during application period for previous funding? So, what's your recommendations for handling this? We have elections in the fall. So, our council members may be hesitant to sign on to a project when their time is coming to an end. Yes and no. So, most recently, what's happened in Straight Shores. We were in the process. We had a new, sorry, I wasn't sure if I cut out at all. I know that the connection's not great right now, but I know we were hoping to apply to FCM for Straight Shores. We had a new council member who was interested, and it seemed like a great partnership. And then we know that their mayor has recently stepped down and they no longer have a mayor. There was a lot of turnover there. And what we had to do ultimately is just choose to kind of take a step back and let them reassess the situation, and hopefully we'll follow up next year. I know that's a little bit of a unique situation, is not having any council. But I think my recommendation is, I guess, if there's a way to highlight the history of work, if there is one that has already been done, like, you know, depending on what the project is this something that has been asked for by the community for years? Is this something that, you know, this is probably not going to change even if the council changes? I think maybe stressing that, but personally, I haven't had any experience with that. It might just be, you might just have to wait till a later funding opportunity as well. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. I'm sorry that's not more helpful, but
Great. If there's not any further questions, I just see one from Rebecca. Then to build off of that, what happens with the funding if the council changes and they no longer want to continue with it or see the value of it, investing in it?
I guess that
And
would be
Cal,
one too.
that's
The
an
Climate
interesting
Atlantic.
idea, I think. Yeah, for sure. I'll chime in and just share what my idea would be. Is that, you know, if the funding's already there, like for example, you've already received it and they just don't want to continue with it, but the funding, you know, there's still money there. The reality is that that money has been divvied out for a particular project. It can't be used for anything else. So I think, you know, just saying like, we may as well keep spending it while we have it. I think that's a really tricky one. I don't know. Trevor, do you have any?
I'm just thinking about the matching dollars from the municipalities. So if they're like, no, we're good, we don't need this,
Mm-hmm.
we want to put our money somewhere
So
else.
I will say that, yeah, we have recently, just in December, applied to the Green Municipal Fund actually with Tantramar. And what I will say about that is the council has had to make a motion, at least in our case, to apply to the funding. They have to make a motion to accept the funding. They have to make a motion to give that money to us. So that is something that has to be passed publicly because you don't want to anymore. In which it might be, you know, maybe they don't want to, but they've already committed to it, and I don't think it would be quite. Sorry, my screen is freezing, but I hope you're able to hear that. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I will repeat it. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's cutting out. Sorry, I was just gonna say that council, in order to accept and spend money, has to make a motion. It has to go through a vote, and I think if they were to choose, if they've already committed money in a budget and they were to choose to not spend it anymore, I think it would have to go through a similar process. I'm not in a municipality. I can't speak to that, but I don't think it's as simple as just deciding not to spend money that's already been allotted for something. The budget has to be approved well in advance. So no, thank you, Madison, for letting me know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cal, for your presentation and the answers to the questions. So from here, we are going to head into some breakout rooms. So we'll open the breakout rooms in just a minute, and you'll see that pop up on your screen. We'll have a breakout room by province. So we'll have some provincial funding discussions and Q&A in each breakout room. The breakout rooms are going to be Newfoundland and Labrador. So you'll see that when it pops up, it'll be labeled NL or Newfoundland Labrador. We'll have a PEI room and a Nova Scotia room. And for the New Brunswick folks, we're going to keep you in the main room so that you can continue to have access to interpretation. So you can listen to the presentation and do some Q&A in both English and French. So again, once the breakout rooms open, you'll see a pop-up on your screen. They'll be labeled Newfoundland Labrador, PEI, Nova Scotia. And if you are in New Brunswick and want to stay in the New Brunswick room, you just stay in the main room. And if you have difficulty accessing the breakout rooms, just post a note in the chat and we can assign you to a specific breakout room. So you can just say, I want to go in the PEI room, and we'll assign you directly to that room. So Caitlin, we can open up the breakout rooms. That'll pop up for everybody and we can head into the rooms. Should see those there. I can see some folks joining. That's great.